Distinguished permanent representatives, we highly value the leadership of the People's Republic of China in the defense of peace and international security, the observance of international law, the preservation, strengthening, and appropriate reform of the United Nations Organization, in particular, the democratization, transparency, and efficiency of the Security Council and the empowerment of the General Assembly, as well as in the construction of a multilateral international order based on sovereign, fair, and democratic equality. Proof of this are the global initiatives promoted by President Xi Jinping that we support to face the current challenges through a genuine multilateral cooperation. The call for this open debate also shows it. On September 26, 1960, at the UN General Assembly, Commander-in-Chief Fidel Castro Ruz said, "The philosophy of dispossession should disappear, and the philosophy of war will have disappeared." We vividly remember this in the year of his centenary. Mr. President, how to refer to the defense of the central role of the United Nations, to the promotion of peace and development, to the safeguarding of the international order, sustained in international law and the basic norms in international relations in order to avoid new conflicts where the strong prevail over the weak, not to mention the genocide against Palestine or the imperialist aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran and the war in the Middle East. The U.S. government, in fact, is in a position of breaking international peace and security and of violating international law and humanitarian international law regarding the Republic of Cuba. The instruction of criminal charges against the leader of the Cuban Revolution, Army General Raúl Castro Ruz, is a morally infamous and legally arbitrary act for abuse of the jurisdiction of the U.S. courts, for the manipulation of the place of the downing of the planes that occurred in the air and maritime space of the Cuban territory, for the terrorist and illegal missions that they frequently carried out in violation of U.S. laws, for the impunity and complicity of the authorities of that country, and for the ignorance of the right to the legitimate defense of the states. It is a politically motivated, fraudulent decision aimed at deceiving American and foreign citizens 30 years after the events with the vile purpose of supporting a military adventure against Cuba to achieve a change of regime or a construction of a nation, as they call it, euphemistically now. The oil or energy fence that the United States applies to Cuba is equivalent, in effect, to a naval blockade, which is an act of war and genocide that subjects the Cuban population to conditions that threaten their integrity and existence and constitutes a cruel and indiscriminate collective punishment that today causes deaths, as reflected by the duplication of the infant mortality rate of 4 to 9.2 per thousand born alive, or the reduction of the life expectancy of cancer-sick children from 85 to 65%. A military aggression would cause a bloodbath. Thousands of Cubans would die defending their homeland and sacred values and reasons, and young Americans would also perish without cause or ideal to defend, dragged into violence by an imperialist, neo-fascist policy of domination, looting, and conquest. I address especially the American citizens, especially their young people. and I appeal to their human values, their pacifist and noble feelings, and I ask them to seek the truth and not allow them to be deceived or manipulated by an elitist, corrupt, and powerful Miami dressing room, not representative of the American people or of the Cubans residing in this country, who are opposed to the barbarity of war and the energy blockade. The president who gave that order of military attack, the Secretary of State and War who instigated him to do so, would go down in history as war criminals, direct authors of crimes against humanity. No justification can be squandered for an aggression or coercive inhuman acts, and similar to that for their humanitarian impact. Let Cuba live in peace. For more than 6 decades, the U.S. government has made pretexts to try to justify its criminal conduct. It has used the absurd argument of presenting the small but symbolic island as a supposed threat to the national security of the nuclear superpower, an idea that defies logic and common sense, in addition to resting on totally mendacious affirmations and insinuations. As President Miguel Díaz-Canel has reiterated, Cuba is not or cannot be a threat. It is not an enemy of the United States, nor does it want to be, despite significant differences with its government. Cuba has deep and fraternal links with the American people and culture. We will continue to warmly welcome American travelers, although their government restricts their freedoms and their businessmen and companies with competitive projects so that they participate without any discrimination in our economic development, although the blockade hinders it. However, now a corrupt and immoral plutocracy writes the legend of the incompetence and supposed corruption of our government and the supposed danger of humanitarian crisis as justification for a foreign intervention. It is cynically said by the executioner himself that in a cold, evil, and deliberate way, it provokes with its actions devastating effects like those that would occur in any country in the world, regardless of its economic potential, its level of development, or the nature of its political system. Despite the lack of progress and goodwill, despite the lack of seriousness and coherence of the American part, we are still willing to continue conversations, to deal with bilateral problems without interference in our internal affairs, nor in our political system, nor in our elections, and to seek forms of civilized behavior and multifaceted cooperation. In particular in matters of terrorism, drug trafficking, organized transnational crime, regular and safe migration, human trafficking, mutual economic compensations, and others. It is a unilateral aggression without precedents and without any justification. Through intimidation and secondary sanctions applicable to third parties, the U.S. government intends to force all states to participate against their will in their atrocious policies against Cuba, which will not happen. I ask the international community to mobilize to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe that can be imposed either by means of weapons or by means of the energy fence and the extreme hardening of the blockade, which also kill and cause suffering. I ask Latin America and the Caribbean to act to preserve their zone of peace and avoid adverse consequences that would destabilize the region. It is time for a broad international articulation above political differences, ideological approaches, historical differences, to put an end to and prevent the mischief that threatens and damages the national interests, the peoples, and the sovereign prerogatives of all states. The Global South should fight for this and collectively protect itself from any reprisal in the voice and collective action and in mutual cooperation. I humbly ask, the time has come for solidarity with Cuba, which has always been with everyone, without ever stopping at sometimes deadly risks, nor in interests or material scarcity. I cannot find a way to refer to the defense of the central role of the United Nations, and to the promotion of peace and development, and to the primordial responsibility of the Security Council in the maintenance of peace and international security, and its contribution to the dialogue and the promotion of political solutions, without asking this Security Council to realistically at least try to fulfill its primary and supreme mandate regarding the military threat and the energy blockade against Cuba. Nor can I refrain from encouraging the General Assembly of the United Nations to use, in any case with determination, its broad and decisive powers, its moral, legal, and democratic authority that the peoples conferred to it in the situation of Cuba. No one should doubt that, at a time we hope will never come, the people of Cuba will fight to the last consequences. Homeland or death, we will win. Thank you very much.